What's going on with y'all? So today you guys want to find out whether you guys have good genetics or not. This is gonna be the perfect video for y'all because I'm going over everything: your muscle bellies, your bone structure, shoulder to waist ratio, everything. This is the only video you need to find out whether you guys have good genetics or not. So anyways, let's get straight into it, man. So the first thing we're gonna look at is, what body type do you guys have? There's three main body types. There's the ectomorph, the endomorph, and the mesomorph. So starting off with the ectomorph, those guys tend to be lankier, skinnier. They have a harder time building muscle and a harder time bulking. Now the endomorph is the total opposite. They have an easier time gaining fat, but a harder time losing that. And they have a harder time cutting. Now going on to the mesomorph, that's the body type that everybody wants. Those people are able to build muscle easier. They can build muscle while being lean, and they can burn fat easily as well. So that's the ideal body type. That's what everybody wants. Now moving on to the shoulder to waist ratio. Now we have two different body types right here. We have one guy with broader shoulders and a smaller waist, while the other guy has a thicker waist. Even though he has more muscle on the shoulder, it's still kind of narrow. It's not as broad as the other guys. This has a lot to do with your bone structure. So one thing you want to focus on is whether you have wide clavicles. Clavicles is this bone right here that runs across right here. Looking at these two images, they have the same exact waist, but since one guy has wider clavicles, it makes his waist give the illusion that it's smaller. So that's how important wide clavicles are. So now moving on to the pelvic bone. Now this is very important. This is your waist size. Now a lot of us want that small aesthetic waist, but a lot of people are just not blessed with that. You know what I mean? A lot of people have wider waist because of their pelvic bone. It's something that you can't change. It's your bone structure. You cannot change your bone structure. So now moving on to the body fat storage. Where do you store most of your fat? So when you think of fat, your fat has to be stored somewhere. Everybody has it different, but there are some common areas. Most guys carry a lot of fat in their lower stomach, which is considered the beer belly, or they have love handles around their waist, or their lower back, or their chest area, which is called man boobs, right? Those are the common areas. So what would be considered good body fat storage genetics? So there's some people that are genetically blessed enough to have most of their body fat stored in their legs instead of their upper body, which means that you can literally bulk up and still have abs. I know you guys seen a couple people like that. Those people are blessed. Most people aren't gonna have that. When you bulk up, a lot of people are gonna store fat in their lower stomach and their lower back and even their chest area. So that's pretty much it with body fat storage. So moving on to the proportions. Now this is very important. So you want to ask yourself, do you have proportional muscles, or do you have certain muscle groups that dominate the other muscle groups? So I'm gonna show you guys a couple examples. So we have torso dominant people versus limb dominant. Torso dominant just means you have bigger chest and it overpowers your arms and shoulders. Whereas you have somebody that's limb dominant that has a small chest and bigger arms and bigger shoulders. So when we look at somebody like Alex Eubank, he is torso dominant. He has a big chest, but because it's so big, it kind of overpowers his arms and his shoulders, and it makes it look kind of underdeveloped. Whereas if you look at somebody that's limb dominant, like More Plays More Dates, his arms are huge, his delts are huge, but look at his chest. It's really, really small. So now we're gonna be moving on to height. Does height matter in bodybuilding? So a lot of people say bodybuilding is a short man's sport. However, right, I'm gonna give you guys some of the benefits that taller guys have. So taller guys, they tend to have better bone structure. Those guys tend to have broader shoulders and smaller waist. When we look at davidlaid, who else? We have people like John Skywalker. Those guys are over 6 feet and they have the more aesthetic look. But the only thing bad about taller guys is that it's harder for them to be able to build muscle on a longer frame. Whereas for a shorter guy, you have shorter limbs, so your muscle bellies are gonna look better. It's gonna be easier for you to build muscle, and that's the good thing about being short when it comes to bodybuilding. So shorter guys, they tend to look a lot better in pictures rather than in real life. So looking at this picture, here's a guy with the name of Jeremy Buendia. He's 5'7", and he has a crazy physique, huge muscles, great muscle bellies. Whereas somebody like John Skywalker here, he's 6'4", he has a little bit less muscle. But when you put them next to each other, it's like John Skywalker is out-angling him because he's just a lot taller than him. So that's what I mean when I say a lot of shorter guys look a lot better in pictures, whereas taller guys look a lot better in person. So now we're gonna finally get into the muscle bellies. This is what a lot of you guys came here to see. We're gonna be starting off with chest genetics. The main thing when it comes to chest genetics is whether you have a gap in the middle of your chest or not. Tristan Lee has a gap right here. This is not something that you can build muscle to fix. It's strictly based off genetics. You cannot fill in your gap. The only thing you can do is make it appear more fuller by gaining more fats, which nobody really wants to do, right? Another thing to look at is chest proportion. Is your chest evenly distributed from the top to the bottom? Larry Wheels, for example, he has an overdeveloped lower chest and it gives him a saggy look. Doesn't look that good at all. He should be working out his upper chest, but sometimes it's just genetics at the end of the day. So now we're gonna move on to the delt genetics. Do you guys have good delt genetics or not? We have 3 different muscles on our shoulders. We have the front delt, the side delt, and the rear delt. Are they all proportional? That's very important. Or is one dominating over the other? Is your front delt dominating your side delt, or is your rear delt over dominating the front delt? That's very important. So what would actually be considered bad delt genetics? Does your delt connect all the way down to the half of your arm? That's something that you want to look at. For example, Bruce Lee, he would have bad delt genetics because he has really narrow shoulders. His delt goes all the way down to the middle of his arm. That's what you don't want. So when we think of what are some good delt genetics, we look at somebody like More Place More Days. Just take a look at his shoulders. Do I really have to explain this? They're round, proportional. They're like big old bowling balls. At the end of the day, you want to work out all of your muscle groups evenly to build that round look. So now moving on to your bicep genetics. Now this is an interesting one. What would be considered bad bicep genetics? Do you have a short muscle belly or not? So to find out whether you have short muscle bellies or not, you want to flex your arm and put your fingers at where there's no muscle, and if you can fit more than 3 fingers, then that would be considered a short muscle belly, which is not a good thing. So looking at these examples, we have somebody like Arnold on the left. He has a shorter muscle belly, but his peak is a lot higher. A lot of people prefer that. Whereas this guy on the right, yes, he does have a shorter peak, but he has a longer muscle belly, which makes his arm look bigger in my opinion. I prefer that instead of a shorter muscle belly and a bigger peak. That's just me personally. But at the end of the day, you want the best of both worlds. You want to have the long muscle belly and the big peak, which is very, very rare. So now moving on to the tricep genetics. Tricep genetics are very important because your tricep is 70% of your arm. So if you have really big triceps, your arms are going to look huge. So something that you want to look at is, does your tricep insert high or low? If it inserts low, then you're blessed. If it inserts high, you're going to have a lot of empty space, which is not a good thing. So side by side of what a good tricep is, we have Kai Green on the left. His tricep is a lot shorter than Phil Heath on the right. It's like his tricep connects all the way down to his elbow, which is good. So now moving on to your ab genetics. Do you guys have good ab genetics or not? What you want to look at is, are your abs symmetrical or asymmetrical? Are your abs sitting right next to each other perfectly, or are they lopsided? Something else you guys want to look at is the muscle development. Do you guys have blocky looking abs, or are they a little bit flat? Another thing you guys want to look at is, how many actual abs do you guys have? Do you guys have a 4-pack, 6-pack? Some people even have 8 packs, 10 packs. I've seen it before. Here's an example of a 10-pack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not only does he have a 10-pack, but they're freaking symmetrical. Only 1 in 5 people can have an 8-pack or higher. So if you guys have an 8-pack, consider yourself lucky. Personally, for me, I don't think abs are that important, because when we look at the best bodybuilder of all time, one of the best We look at Arnold. He only has a 4-pack. Nobody really focuses on his abs because his other muscle groups are just really good. So I don't think abs are that important. Now looking at your oblique genetics, now these are very important. It's more important than abs in my opinion. If you have big obliques, then I honestly feel bad for you. So when we look at these two pictures, we look at the guy on the left. He has really small obliques, which makes his waist look a lot smaller. We all want obliques like this. Whereas when we look at the guy on the right, he has very thick obliques, and his waist almost looks as wide as his shoulders. It doesn't look good at all. Kind of makes him look like he has like a blocky physique. It's not that pleasant looking at all. It's something that you can't change at the end of the day, so it is what it is, man. Now, quad genetics. So when it comes to quad genetics, we're looking at whether you have a sweep or not. Does your sweep come from the top of your femur all the way down to your knee? Or do your quads don't even really have a sweep like that? Do they kind of look like a brick? Does it go straight down on the side of your leg? It doesn't like pop out. It's not as round. That's something that you want to look at. So now we're going to move on to the calf genetics. Now, do you guys have good calf genetics or not? Now, calf genetics are considered the most genetic place, meaning that you either have them or you don't. You're either born with them or you're not. I train my calves all the time, yet my 12-year-old cousin has better calves than me. So something you want to look at is, does your calf enter high or low? If it enters high, then it's going to be harder to build muscle and make it look big. Whereas if it looks low, you're going to have more muscle to put right there. Something that I noticed that taller people have smaller calves, since they have, you know, a lot more muscle that they have to fill out on their long legs. So now moving on to the back. Do you have good back genetics? Something you want to look at is whether you have low or high lat insertions. Higher lats have a shorter muscle belly, meaning that you'll have less room for muscle growth, giving it a less thick look. Whereas lower lats are the total opposite. It'll give you a more thicker look because you'll have more muscle on your back. And in some cases, I see some people with really good lower back development to the point where they build, I call it back abs. It looks like little abs on their back, which I think looks really cool. So this is the end of the video. I went over as much as I can. One thing I want to say is that don't let your genetics stop you from working out. If you work out consistently, you're gonna look better than 90% of the people, even if you have bad genetics or not, because most people don't even lift or work out at all. So if you guys want a more in-depth video about just a certain body part or anything else, anything you guys want, just let me know in the comments and I'll make a video about it. But if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys hit the like button and hit the subscribe button, and I'm out.